Welcome to Relationship Mastery, a podcast for those who want to learn how to master the art of creating happy, healthy, and loving relationships. Please join me, Adey-Jones, and my co-host, Barry Selby, each Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for a lively and informative conversation on everything to do with relationships. Welcome, everybody. Hi, Barry. How are you doing this week?
Hi, Del. I'm glad it's doing well. Glad to be here. And you're doing well too, or doing better now, which is good to have you here too.
Yeah. So I've been traveling a bit, so good to be back. So today, we are going to be talking about conscious conflict resolution. And this has been on both Barry and I's radar lately. So it's the perfect topic to talk about. But it's, we can't have relationships without butting heads sometimes. Bottom line, opposites attract, and there's a reason why we are attracted to somebody else that has differences. The unfortunate things is sometimes, along the way we start trying to change our partner into ourselves.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, it's like you can have a relationship with no conflict, but it'll be very boring, to be honest, because the conflict usually arises because of the differences, and because you're ideally active and creative people. Because you can have a very flat-line relationship. I've seen people like that who have, like, no arguments, no conflict whatsoever, but there's no joy, there's no excitement, there's nothing. So anybody in a healthy relationship is going to have this come up. So you're absolutely right. That conflict is part of the journey.
Yeah.
With one better word.
Exactly. And so today we're going to be talking about how to navigate that in the healthiest way possible, and how to also view it. I think initially it's also how to view it, to not even look at it as conflict necessarily, but as an opportunity for growth, an opportunity to see a different perspective, an opportunity to have, as you say, excitement in your life, and not living in this echo chamber. Who wants to just basically listen to themselves all day? That's a little.
Someone keeps agreeing with you is not ideal for a healthy relationship. It can get boring very quickly.
Exactly. I'm thinking back to what you shared in some of our earlier shows, where you said that you never saw your parents argue.
True. Yeah. Well, and to put the context on that, spin on that, and I can maybe attribute it to my upbringing, and obviously both being from the old country, there's still differences in way we get raised. But my experience definitely was one where arguments weren't visible. They weren't seen or weren't observed by my young self.
Mm-hmm.
And so not knowing that was even possible in a loving relationship meant it was something that I didn't know how to handle once I got into a loving relationship. And so to bring it back to what we're talking about today, this whole thing about it's okay to have differences of opinion, which is really what an argument is, just amplified, and still be loving, is really what conscious conflict resolution really is about. It's like, how do you have that perspective shift? And I'm using those terms intentionally, not just getting upset and pissed off at somebody else, but how do you have a different perspective and stay loving whilst you're in emotional upset? That's what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what really helped me with this so much was when I first started studying the three principles, and we talk about something. Where's my? Oh, here we go. Here's my little Buddha, and my little Buddha, my little snow globe. But when I used to think that there was a world out there that we were all looking at, and when take for example maybe one of my ex relationships, not my present one. But I would think, especially if that person had a world view that was dramatically opposed to mine, like say sort of a dog eat dog world and that type of thing. Whereas I'm sort of more Pollyanna and everybody's lovely, let's be lovely to everybody, sort of thing.
Yeah.
I used to think, how could you think that way? How could you be that way? How can you see the world in that way and in such a negative perspective? And now that I understand that we all live in these separate realities, we all view the world through our lens, our own unique lens. And so it's not like this world out there that we're disagreeing on. It's just, and to respect that we all do have these separate realities that we live in.
Right.
And when we
Absolutely.
do that, we're less likely to be outraged when somebody sees something differently to us, or critical of their behavior. We're in more an acceptance of, well, that's just the lens they're looking through. It's no better, no less than. It's just different to mine.
Well, the key of that one, or the key premise of that, is understanding is that none of us see things the right way. We just
Exactly.
see it out. And I think if we start from that perspective, and I agree with you totally, if we could all, wishful thinking, I know, but if we could all see through the lens of the world, or the life of the world through the lens that we have, and knowing it's our own particular personal viewpoint, not the um, ultimate true way of seeing things, that we're all seeing it differently, then it starts to recognize there's a little bit more humility that comes through. And we become less attached to saying, my way's the right way and everyone else is wrong. It's like, no, we're all just different.
Yeah.
And that can shift things quite dramatically.
Yeah, I totally agree. Exactly. I mean, I think that's the foundation. And going back to, as I said, that initial thing when I said that, opposites attract. I mean,
Hmm.
I think we sort of inherently we want more balance in our life. And I think we are attracted to somebody that has a different viewpoint, or has something that they bring a quality to our experience of life that is out of our sphere. Therefore, our life becomes richer and more interesting and exciting because they do have this different perspective.
Hmm. In fact, I would use the term additive would be a good way of putting it, because it's the
Exactly.
thing is you want, because not that we're lacking anything, but it simply adds a new dimension, a new perspective, so that the relationship becomes more multidimensional, more experiential. So yeah, I love that way of putting it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm thinking of like the Enneagram. They use, I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram, but there's all these sort of it's like a Myers-Briggs thing. There's these different personality types, and you have a default set point. You can slip into the sort of the perfectionist, or the misunderstood artist, or the the person that wants all the excitement, the sevens, but the thing is, this does is it respects every, none of them are better than or less than another. They're different,
Mhm.
but to be wholly and fully integrated is to have aspects of all of those areas within yourself, and that makes you
Right.
a sort of multidimensional person. And it's the same thing. That's why we have relationships. That's why we have relationships with different people in our lives, completely different,
Yes.
not just our primary partner, but our friendship groups. I mean, I look at my friends, and I have the extrovert, and I have the introvert, the sensitive ones, and I have this one and that one, and I love them all because they all bring something to the table. They all bring a quality that maybe is not as you know evident in my own personality. So
Yeah. I've been somewhat immersed for the actual last few years in human design, and it's a
yeah,
similar thing where you understand, because I mean, there's some things like Myers Briggs is one, and Enneagram as well. Even just astrology, it's like you notice that everyone has their own particular flavor and perspective that make up their personality and how they present. And when you start recognizing that everyone's different and unique, and none is better than worse, then
yeah,
you get to start recognizing the joy of the exploration of something new when you meet somebody you don't know what's familiar to you. Like, are you saying with friends you have that are on different extremes of introvert and extrovert? It's something I think that's one of the joys of having a diverse and rich social circle, because that is where life gets more interesting. Because if you hang out with people and keep, like, if, was it back in the old days, talking about how like, you'd be surrounded by yes men, sort of in business. That is so, frankly, it's so tedious, but also it's so detrimental to growth and learning, and becoming conscious for that matter. So having that array and that diversity in the people you're around, and yes, in relationships, someone who is not necessarily directly opposite, but certainly different from you,
yeah.
is what makes the relationship more fun. So have at it.
Exactly. All right, so now let's get to the so you've got somebody you're in a close personal relationship with, and they
Hmm.
are different from you. And what attracted you initially about them is now driving you nuts. and you're trying to change them and have them see or behave the way that you do. So
Right.
let's just talk about some of the ways to handle that those differences. I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think respecting that separate realities is fundamental. And but I think one of the biggest things we do, and there's a few things we do, but is say we're having, our feelings are upset, or we're having a reaction to something. Number one is to focus on being responsive and not reactive, which means
Yes.
slow down. You've got all the time in the world to hear each other out. So there is no hurry to get your point across. I think that is a fundamental thing, and with that comes a multitude of things. But I think fundamentally is the using the I statements instead of the you statements. You know, the blaming of the other person, just saying, when you do this, I feel, or something. Just say, when I'm in this situation, I feel this way. And there's no yous, there's no you in the sentence.
Well, the thing.
Well, I was just going to say, well, it helps. When you describe the situation without saying the other person's to blame for it, just say, when this situation occurs, I feel this way. I mean, obviously, the other person is involved in the situation. But what it does is, when you talk about the situation as opposed to the you statements, that other person is able to hear better. They're less defensive. They're able to see the situation as separate from them, so they don't feel so attacked. And they're more open to hearing what you have to say. So it's really, how do you get heard? It's not about, wrapping the other person in cotton wool. It's about, how do you want to be heard and received?
Absolutely. I mean, if you go back and listen to one of our first 2 or 3 episodes, we did talk about codependency as one of the paradigms that we want to grow out of and become more aware of. And in this conversation with conflict, a lot of codependency shows up in this issue. People do that thing, like you're saying, it's like, you did this to me and your fault, and you this and you that and you the other. The shift definitely is ownership language. So I agree with you. The first person really saying true. The key thing is, though, also is noticing is that you may find yourself having to include the other person saying, when you do that, I feel this, versus when you do that, that does that to me.
Yeah.
Because again, you're a victim.
Yeah.
But it's the key thing about saying is like when I see you do this, I feel certain ways, which is not saying it's because of that. It's saying that I realize that I have control over that. Again, removing codependency, so I can do something about it myself. And yes, ultimately, there's understanding on both sides of the conversation. But the key thing is to definitely claim for your own self how you are choosing to be triggered or be reactive versus responsive, as you said, so that you can have a different choice point at that moment to say, I'm going to shift how I do that. So I don't have to carry that burden of upset and distress because of something that I perceive that you did, because that's the thing. It's all perception as well.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, what's coming up for me right now is, I think we have to do a qualifier here. I mean, we're not saying, take an example of, you've just found your partner cheating. It's not like, well, when there's cheating in the relationship, I feel this, I mean, we do have to hold each other accountable for what we've contributed to the situation. But I think what I'm trying to say more is, the more you can keep it on the situation as opposed to the blaming, the more open somebody else is to see the hurt that their actions have caused, that their participation in that situation has created a lack of trust or hurt or whatever, as opposed to immediately getting in that defensive position when they feel attacked and blamed. The other one I think is really key is the listening without forming a response. That one. We can see when our partner's minds are going and we're saying something, and you can see they're not listening. They are completely formulating their response.
Well, the thing is that communication challenge is not just based in arguments and upsets. It happens all the time. Unfortunately, that's what people do, is when they're listening to somebody else talking, they're already rehearsing their own response, and oftentimes they miss what the other person's communicating. So when you're in a conflict or an argument, that just amplifies the discord and the challenge of trying to get through it. So yeah, I agree with you totally. To have the ability to not actually, and this is challenging, I know, especially for men, because we are more single-focused people. We tend to think things more linearly. So when our partner, our woman, says something to us, we get attached to that first thing she said, and we ignore everything she said after that because that one thing got our attention. So the challenge is, especially more so for men, but just as true for women, is, can we just be present without trying to fix, resolve, defend, or block anything that's being said, and just simply let it happen? Because one of the things, and actually one of the things I know from Alison Armstrong, is men and women's upsets do come out differently. And so for women, for example, when a woman gets upset, it tends to be, and these are not generalities, but it tends to be that when she is upset, she is tending to share like a lot of accumulated upset. And again, we're not talking about, cheating, something like that. We're talking about just in general relationship conflicts. And what happens is she wants to just get it out of the system. To be clear, one of the things that women, and again, using Alison Armstrong's teaching, so for some women this may not fit, just to be clear, is that when they voice their upset, it's a means of venting and releasing to be free, because the toxicity they're carrying is too much to bear. The challenge is that men are wired to be problem solvers. So we think that when she's upset, we got to fix her because she's broken somehow. This is the wiring we have inside, not conscious, just wired in. So the challenge for us men, or the opportunity for us men, is to not respond to everything that happens, but to hold a space and be present. Because for most women, if the man they're with can simply be present with her when she's upset, it's way more healing and way more thankful to her than if we come up with answers, or if we try to defend anything or make her wrong or any of that stuff. So understanding the differences between the way men and women express their upset is so powerful, because it changes the way you actually participate.
Well, as you know, this is where you and I see things differently, which is great.
I can see on your face.
You can see my face. Yeah, but just because I don't tend to follow that sort of way of
That's
thinking.
why we're different.
But it doesn't mean it doesn't mean you're right, I'm wrong, vice versa. This is perfect. This we are practicing conscious conflict resolution. But I hear you, and I think maybe there is a tendency for more women, and tendency I would say, but I think that as I've always said, I feel that there's male and female within all of us, and I think some women I know are. I mean, I'm very pragmatic, problem-solving, sort of logical thinking sort of person, and can be accused of being more proactive as problem-solving rather than wallowing in an emotion or a feeling. I mean, I certainly believe in feeling it and letting it coming up and never suppressing it. But I do tend to be more like, I've only got so much energy and I want it to be forward-focused as opposed to going backwards. But yes, I totally agree. And you said a couple of things that were really good. And that is, that brought up something for me when you said that I'll say some people, as opposed to women, some people
Indeed.
tend to sort of accumulate their grievances. And when it does come out, it comes out as a torrent of like, you do this and this and this and this, and they catastrophize, and there's a laundry list of, and it's like, it's like fire hosing the other person, and they're like, oh my God, I had no idea you felt this way, and can't I do anything right? And it's overwhelming. So that's another one about the conscious conflict resolution, is to really address an issue as it comes up. Do not suppress it and let it build up steam and heat and anger and energy, so that when it does come out, it comes out sideways, or it comes out, as I say, on a laundry list of all the other grievances. So it's to really address one issue at a time. So therefore, the other person can hear you. They're not, as I said, getting in that defensive mode of, oh my God, I'm being fire hosed here. I can't do anything right. So it's really important, I think, to and it's self-honoring as well. It's, you're not minimizing and suppressing and denying, and therefore, as I say, it's going to come out at some point. So to share it from more of a neutral perspective, as opposed to that sort of shoved down, suppressed, sideways energy that comes out. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, no, I get that, and I receive your feedback, and I definitely see the difference and understand their perspectives, which I love. But a couple things I want to add to the toolkit, so to speak. One of which is, I know for this truth for a lot of men, and for myself, I know this one too, is when I'm getting upset, I don't necessarily feel safe in how upset I'm getting. So, and I've learned this lesson, I've heard this from one of my teachers, and I definitely share other people too, is for men who have this experience, one of the best things that can happen, you can do for yourself when you start getting upset, is to go somewhere else to get the energy out first. Because yes, there may be something you need to communicate, but if it comes to all that energy and that brute force energy, it's not going to be healthy for either one of you.
Mm.
So to go somewhere like to go for a run or go hiking or go hit a punching bag, go to the gym, something that gets your body exerting energy to get the feelings out. So when you come back to your partner, you can communicate from a more calmed place. Still important and still impactful, but without the physical vibration being so high. So it's one thing to add conversation. Second one was quickly add. This is something that I have become very aware of as well, and it's a fun thing to play with. And I haven't had used it enough to know if it's always true, but it's something to play with. Is if you're having an argument or conflict with somebody, particularly someone your partner, is when you have the conflict, sit side by side rather than face to face. There's something that happens energetically when you're not at each other, because the thing is, the challenge when you add each other, what tends to happen is it becomes a ping pong match. You bounce it back and forth, the energy inside. Even if you're not doing anything like that, there's that containment energy. But if you're facing side by side, facing the same direction, what tends to happen is the energy can then flow out. And ideally, the resolution can happen more easily because there's more spaciousness in there. So just something else to add to the toolkit of resolutions.
That's fascinating, because I, believe it or not, had a different opinion on that one too.
I love it.
um, but no, I mean, that's very interesting. Well, I love what you said initially too, because I do think that, and especially if they grew up in your environment where you did not witness conflict, so it was alien to you. And I think some people are afraid of it, are afraid of that energy. You know, I grew up in a, I'm Welsh, we're fiery. And so, you know, that fiery Celt in me, I'm quite comfortable with my emoting of my emotions.
Mhm.
But I agree with you. I think if it is something that's scary for you, I mean, I can share very clearly and concisely what I'm feeling without feeling overwhelmed by it and without feeling like I need to attack with it. But if you
Right.
are afraid of that surge of emotions, I think that's a fabulous idea. Go for a run. Go and do something to release some of that pressure, some of that energy, until you're in a comfortable place to actually, as you said, share your truth. We're not suppressing it. We're not trying to get rid of it. We're just trying to get to the place where we can share it from a healthy place.
Hmm.
What I was going to say, though, which I found interesting when you said sit by side, and again, it's not, I don't think your way is right and my way is wrong, or vice versa. Some people suggest that you actually do really face each other and focus on the loving essence of who that person is,
Okay.
understanding that underneath that human, experience of emotions, we have psychology as humans. There is a spiritual being under there that is nothing but pure love and peace. And if
Right.
we can focus on that, I call it the bank account of goodwill. If we can
Mm.
view each other as not as opponents or as the enemy, but somebody that at their essence loves us and wishes us well. They're just caught up in a very natural human reaction right now to, say, a given situation. And they're caught up and their emotions are unsettled, and they're coming out sort of a little bit, maybe more forcefully than you might like. But to really keep remembering that underneath it, this is your partner, this is your friend, this is somebody that loves you. They're not out to get you. They're not
Right.
out to punish you or anything. They're just caught up in whatever emotional storm they're going through in the moment, and to just keep focusing on that loving essence that is at the core of all of us. All of us. The fear doesn't exist in that spiritual part of us. That we're just pure love and bliss and peace. Fear exists in our human thinking and our human minds when we naturally get fearful. Our brains are wired to recognize danger, to protect ourselves. Our egos are there to protect ourselves. But underneath that is that pure love and goodwill for each other. So, and again, maybe we can still feel that if we're sitting side by side. Maybe we don't have to sort of look at each other and keep that as the forefront of our minds during conflict.
Well, I guess to say none of these are cast in stone as being the right way or the wrong way, as you said. And all the things I think we're offering here in this conversation, I think that recommend people play with, because some might work better than other things. Some things, because I agree with you, in some situations, and it isn't necessarily easy initially, but simply face the other person and see the loving expression of who they are underneath all that cacophony and upset and firestorm of things coming out. It's almost like it's a test of will almost to hold that space.
Mm-hmm.
But to do so, yes, can be so rewarding and can be so generative of intimacy and safety that can come after it. But getting through it is the challenge. So maybe it's something where you start one way and then come face to face as you start working through and become deeper and deeper and deeper into the truth of who you are underneath all of that stuff.
Yeah. I
But
think
yeah,
sorry.
sorry, after you.
No, you go back. Finish saying sorry. What did you say?
I think I did.
Okay.
I think I did complete.
There's a little lag here. We're talking over each other sometimes. Yes, and I think the thing to also keep in mind, anytime there's any anger is being expressed, or it's always fear-based. It's fear-based. So I think it helps us to not look at the other person as this angry opponent, but as a fearful person. And then it's easier to see that, oh gosh, this is actually a really loving person that's afraid right now, and they're expressing it through anger. And that helps, that step in between the sort of, sometimes, as you say, it's hard to, when somebody's being angry, to see the loving essence. But when you see that underneath anger is fear, it's much easier to have compassion for the other person and to say, gosh, they're really afraid right now. They're either afraid of losing the relationship, or afraid of losing themselves, or whatever it is, that there's fear there. And that's why they are maybe in a more agitated state. The other
Yeah.
thing I wanted to share, which I think I may have shared this earlier, I don't know if I did on another show, but when I was studying Kabbalah, we were teaching it to young children, and we had a salt and pepper shaker, and we would say, okay, the salt here is like kind words, and we sort of shake a bit of that on the plate, and then we say, okay, here's the pepper shaker, and this is some sort of angry words, and we shake that on the plate. Then we sort of swirl the plate around, and then we would say to the children, okay, so now you've calmed down and you want to take the pepper back. Let's take all the pepper out of that mixture there. And the kids would look at us and go, we can't do that. I mean, because you really can't. And I think it helps to be mindful, to really check that want or need to sort of, maybe if you're feeling hurt, to hurt back, because it really is hard to take back hurtful words. You can say sorry, you can say I didn't mean it was meant in anger, but there is a stain that is left. I mean, can that stain dissipate? Yes, over time, but it can't just be retracted immediately with a sorry, I didn't mean that. It stays there, it leaves its effect. And these are things that I'm speaking from experience. I look back on the previous relationship where I think that we absolutely tore each other down in the end, and something I walked away from going, I will never do that again, because you could just see it's almost like getting this beautiful vase, and you smash it and then you glue it back together, and then you smash it again, and this the little pieces of glass get smaller and smaller and smaller, and in the end all you've got is like these sort of like glue with little shards of glass in it, as opposed to this gorgeous vase that first existed. So we have to be, really aware of I'm thinking of Miguel, 4 agreements again, being as best we can, being impeccable with our word, not just letting ourselves fly off the handle and then just think that clean up on aisle 9 is going to work.
Part of that for me, and an underscore, is also about how do you make amends?
Yeah.
Because some of the challenges when you get the stuff out, you realize that there's things you didn't want to have said at some point, but it came back to haunt you. But also the feelings that you may have harmed the other person energetically, and you need to make some amends. Not necessarily to apologize, but simply to reassure and to bring the loving back into place. Because as we said earlier, the loving can be underneath everything, but sometimes we forget, and we still get caught up in all the mental and verbal discord that's been happening between us.
Yeah.
So having an intention to come to resolution at the end, which is more peaceful, much recommended highly as well.
Well, you've perfectly set up our next show, which is how to have conscious apologies and taking responsibility for what we've said and making amends. So that is definitely something we're going to get deeper into the next time. So
Stay tuned.
That was a very, very fast show, Barry. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for listening. That was wonderful. Thanks, Barry, for
Thank you, Del.
demonstrating our differences so well here.
We'll see you folks next week. Take care of yourselves.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
We trust you enjoyed this episode and invite you to share this with your friends and loved ones. In fact, please subscribe to our Relationship Mastery podcast. That way you'll get each new episode, fresh and shiny, as soon as it is released. We'd love to hear from you as well, so go ahead and enter your questions and comments at relationshipmastery.show. Take good care. We will connect with you in our next episode of Relationship Mastery.